Hi everybody, welcome to our webinar that we're hosting this afternoon. We've got quite a few people on this call with us today. We've got Simon Dick from Wood, we've got Alison Grieve from Management Dynamics, myself from Management Dynamics, and we've got Peter from Management Dynamics. Shall we start with some introductions? And as you're arriving, guys, just tell us who you are in the chat as well. So let's hear who you are. You can find the chat down the bottom of your screen. We'll also be using the Q&A function. If you want to pose any questions throughout the session, please do. I'll let Peter explain how to find all of that in a moment. Simon, would you mind introducing yourself? Tell us a bit about you and about Wood as well.
Sure, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, my name is Simon Dick. I'm the Vice President of Learning and Development with Wood. We're a company that's primarily engineering and construction. We operate in the energy and the built environment. We're 40,000 people across 60 countries, about 100-year history all in, albeit through different guises, and headquartered out of Aberdeen. And that's where I'm calling you from. Well, that's where I'm calling in from today. I think more years than I care to remember in HR, split quite nicely. First half of my career was generalist HR, and more recently the L&D space.
Lovely. Thanks, Simon. It's really lovely to have you here today. Ali, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, so Alison Grieve, one of the directors here at Management Dynamics, and Management Dynamics specialises in, I suppose, data-driven, but really leadership and talent development, looking at it from all guises and creating bespoke solutions for our clients, and making sure that whatever we're doing has a good big business impact and impacts individuals too. So I've come from a corporate background, a broad general management, leadership background, and then specializing more in the HR and then the talent field, and have since been working in the consultancy space with a wide range of industries and organizations, mainly large multinationals, but not only multinationals, but I really do enjoy that sort of global world and working across many cultures, organizations, and flavors. And I think that's one of the sort of hallmarks of us at Management Dynamics.
Lovely, thanks, Ali. Lovely to have you here as well, as always. And I'm Jenni Miller, so I'm the other director at Management Dynamics. Ali and I founded the business together, and like Ali, a strong corporate background in leadership development, talent management, and team development as well. Peter, tell us about you.
Yeah, I'm Peter Firth. Nice to have you all here. I'm a customer experience consultant at Management Dynamics. So as the name suggests, I look after our experience from a customer point of view. But I'm also here really just to, I'll be looking in the chat, and I really do want to invite you guys to, have an input. If you've got a question for Simon or for Ali, please get involved, and you can do that in two ways. So I think some of you are finding the chat, which is great, and there's also a Q&A button as well, so you can submit questions to there, and we'll try and cover them as we go through. But I'm really looking forward to what should be a really great discussion. So Jenny, take us away.
Thanks, Peter. So we've got about 45 minutes for this session. We will bring your questions in as you ask them, or maybe we'll wait to the end, depending on what feels right in terms of the flow of the session. We're here to talk about a leadership program that Management Dynamics co-created with Wood. And I was looking at some of the data that some analytics that we pulled together in preparation for this webinar. I was a bit blown away by it, actually. Simon, we had 233 Korn Ferry assessments. We'll talk a bit more about what those are a little bit later. 11,023 hours of learning. Does that mean you actually delivered 11,000 hours of learning yourselves? And 147 participants across 26 countries. And an average score in terms of feedback of this program of 4.7 out of 5, which is actually well up. We track our norm, and that's well above norm for most of our programs, right, Ali?
Yeah.
Could you give us a bit of the context, Simon? What was going on in the business that meant you decided that you needed to create something?
Well, I think right at the beginning, when we set out what we're trying to achieve with, identifying our high potential employees and how we would develop them, it was business as usual. So it was before the pandemic. There was no even hint of the kind of the disruption that was going to, that was about to come. So it was probably best described as business as usual. We piloted a couple of tools. To help us identify and kind of really call out, find out who those high potentials were. And then the next bit, if you like, was sort of a little bit flexible, a little bit fluid. We thought, we'll identify a tool, we'll assess people. So we did that. And then it was a case of, okay, how do we take the information that we've gathered through the Korn Ferry assessment and put together a program? Then the pandemic hit. And that really changed everything, because of course we went overnight to working from home. Our business was hugely impacted by the pandemic, so less appetite to do the types of things that we might have done normally. So really, with all of that happening, all of that coming together at the same time, this great desire to do something and to do something different for our high potentials. And then we kind of came up against the pandemic, the business limitations, and even just the financial and even the will to do something at a time when there was so much change going on. We found it particularly challenging to unlock what we were going to do. So that was really where we were when this first set about. We in L&D had a desire to do something to develop this cohort that we'd spent some time identifying, but we were coming up against quite a bit of resistance just as a result of what was happening globally.
Yeah, lovely. And we'll explore a little bit more about kind of how you overcame that resistance in the business and what were some of the core things that really helped to get this signed off in the first place, because it was quite a tough stakeholder environment for you, wasn't it, to start with?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The word unprecedented has been used too much in the last couple of years, but it was unprecedented, if I could say it once.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ali, tell us a little bit about the starting point for the design of this program.
Well, it wasn't really about a program when we started. It was more about having some information about these high potentials. And so they all went through the Korn Ferry assessment of leadership potential, which measures about 20 different things. And getting that data, and we said to Simon and his team, we'll analyze it and see what comes out and provide you with some recommendations. So we took the data, we cut it, chopped it in all kinds of ways. We looked at it from levels, we looked at it from the actual signposts within the data, and really what it came out with was some key gaps. And of course, the Korn Ferry assessment of leadership potential is measuring people for senior potential. You can set the bar where you want, but we'd expect to find some gaps. And then what we were able to identify was some recommendations for individuals. It's a great report with an individual debrief, and we're debriefing everybody individually. So they were all getting great individual development plans. But what we were able to do as well was inform about the kinds of succession planning moves that people could really benefit from as a result of that, to help them grow to the next level, some of the career challenges that they needed to incorporate into their next moves, and also where some of the gaps looked a bit wider and more generic, that we could bring about some recommendations for a leadership program. So we then took the data and we cut it to identify where the biggest gaps were. And we found that there were some areas specifically where there were over 60% of the people assessed had scored really quite low on. And so that's why we said, well, this is a sort of priority 1, and then here's a priority 2 of things that you could take away and work with. And at that stage, it was just sort of topic, those were the sort of gaps in the results. It wasn't how are we going to do it. Although we were making a recommendation, it would need to be virtual at that time.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the Korn Ferry assessment of leadership potential? I know we'd use it a lot and we work with it a lot as well, but a lot of people might not have come across that before. What is it about that assessment that is so useful?
I know everybody knows I really love this tool. So
you don't just really love it, Ali.
I'm a zealot. I love this tool. I love it because it measures 7 very different things, which are all extremely important in identifying leadership potential, but also getting individuals to think about where do they want to go and what do they really need to do. So I think in terms of having an assessment that from an individual perspective is completely eye-opening and gets them to think about their career and where they want to go and what they're going to have to do. And it's not just about, oh, read a book or go on a course, it's much wider than that. So it measures 7 things. It's a psychometric, it's fully validated and verified by Korn Ferry. It's been tested on thousands of leaders, and it's a really powerful tool. And when you look at it, it all makes sense as well. So it's not one of those psychological, scary things that nobody understands. It's completely, understandable for all of us. So it looks at the drive. What makes me want to be a leader? How driven am I? How much do I want to advance to those positions? We know it takes some sacrifice and effort. We also know that it looks at your experience. What experiences have you got? What depth of experience? Because you need some depth in subjects, but what about the breadth of experience? And to get to those senior positions, there's certain challenges that you need to have come across. Some of them are for multinationals about moving internationally, but it's also about, have you, managed a big crisis, for example? I think we've got lots
Everyone
of leaders
can say yes to that now.
who've ticked that off their box recently. It looks at awareness. We know that awareness, self-awareness, but also awareness within a group is critical for leadership success. And learning agility. So it measures 4 aspects of learning agility: your mental agility, people agility, change agility, and results agility. And that's about how you apply yourself in first-time situations. So if you're a leader and you've grown in one function and you're now responsible for a whole business unit, you're going to be coming into first-time situations. And as the world evolves and you hear about the VUCA, lots of first-time situations. So it's a real differentiator for those senior leadership positions. We also look at leadership traits within it. So we've got 5 leadership traits, and we've got correlations within KFALP that tell you which leadership traits are correlated more with success at senior positions. And then finally, capacity, your mental ability to process and deal with the complexity and problem solving that's required. And then the final bit that's included is a derailer assessment. So, where might you go off the rails? So it's really comprehensive. And to take this data and then help Wood look at it and make sense of it from a, how do we create and look at our whole talent pool, and what do we do to really support them to get to the next level, was really interesting. And the data enabled us to pull out some really core recommendations.
Simon, how did the data work for you guys in Wood?
Well, there was 2 things I think that sort of really stand out. First off was the quality of the conversations, that we had with people in terms of the feedback after the assessment. So it was getting people to think about things, in a much different, much deeper way. So Alison mentioned change agility, results agility. If I just take change agility as an example, we're an organization that changes quite a bit. It's a fairly regular aspect. So I would say that we're all pretty good at change. But when we started talking about change agility, it was how good are we at actually being the ones to think about, to initiate, to take it from an idea right through to an implemented outcome or solution. That's very different. So we all score highly when it comes to getting on board and adapting to change and changing. But in terms of this group of high potentials, what was their preference? What was the likelihood that they were going to step out and be the one leading the change? So it gave us a kind of a different lens through which to look at some of those agilities. And I can give an example of each of them. But for the purpose of time, I won't do that. But the other thing was just that hard data. We were able, once Management Dynamics had looked at the data, aggregated it, there was a couple of really apparent things that came out, and one of them, the strongest one that came out was, we coined the term the anatomy of a career in Wood. It looked like everybody, or certainly 90% of this population, relied heavily on hierarchy, on structure, on tried and tested. It's the other side of the change agility, I guess. And that really, when we sat down and looked at it, that was our aha moment around, well, we shouldn't be surprised by that, because we typically hire engineering graduates who have spent 4 years in a fairly rigid, engineering education program. they probably then spent something between 7 to 10 years in a highly rigid engineering environment, using engineering standards that could be anything up to 30 plus years old. And we are an organisation culturally that I think encourages that, because people come to Wood for tried and tested, delivered on time, on budget, highly detailed scopes of work. So we, if you like, we kind of created this layer and this high potential cohort that didn't want to step out, that didn't see the need even to step out, or weren't even rewarded for the stepping out. It was much more about compliance and adherence than it was to start thinking like a senior leader. So that was a huge piece for us. I know we'll come on to talk about the business case at some point, but that made the business case for us. We were able to say, look at the data, this is what it's telling us. We could all associate with that, because when we're having conversations around succession and people's readiness, those were some of the questions that were coming up around about, well, how likely is this person to change anything? They're doing a good job and they deliver at the level they're at, but are they the future leader? So again, this really shone a light, aha moment, really shaped the way that we then thought about what this program needs to do. It needs to take people from that kind of environment to start to thinking outside the box, that was going to be a little bit, what got them there wasn't going to get them any further. It was going to have to be different the next piece if they were to fulfill their potential and move into a increasingly senior role.
So just reflecting on what you're saying there, Simon, it sounds like taking that data-driven approach to designing the program in the first place, to even establishing that there was even a need for a program or something, some sort of whatever that the thing might be, to getting it signed off by your leadership team, your key stakeholders. But also, it sounds like there must also be a personal benefit to the participants as well. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think in terms of selling it to individuals, that wasn't difficult either, because this was really, we'd answer the question, what's in it for you, right up front, so that we'd taken the assessments, we'd aggregated the score, we'd identified where the needs were. So this was never a, we've decided what you should learn. It was very much a case of, well, we've assessed and we've designed and we've built the program around very specific needs. And I think by using the data, the 150 odd individuals have been on a program that is almost tailored to their specific needs, as much as it could be for that number. But everybody was coming to the program with, this is a specific need. I need to learn more about this. Through the validity of the assessment, of the quantitative assessment, they bought into straight away that it was a development area, and then they bought into the need to come and learn, to come and find out more about what it was for them. I don't think we ever had a session where people were switching off thinking, well, I've got this bit covered. We were always in a session that was a case of, here's some learning, here's some stretch for you. And that helped in terms of engagement, the amount of people participated, the level of their curiosity around about asking questions, getting engaged in those virtual sessions. So from a personal perspective, people right from the get-go were extremely important.
And I think that just reflecting on what really helped with that was first of all, they'd had that one-on-one debrief of their Korn Ferry assessment of leadership potential, so they could see really clearly what the links were to the program. But also during the program, we were very clear that we designed it with those needs in mind. So we were linking it back very closely all the way through, weren't we? Which made a massive difference to that buy-in from the participants.
No, I think, I don't know if I ever told you this before or not, Jenni, but I think there was one person, just one person, when we did the assessment, who came back and said, that's not me, I don't recognize that person in the assessment. And when we went back to the line manager, frustratingly, the line manager said, yeah, I expected they would say that. They never believed any of that stuff. So I thought, it's kind of wasted our time.
There's always one.
So I suppose in its own way that did validate the program as well, or the assessment as well. And there's always one outlier.
Self-awareness, maybe.
Yeah, could probably tell you what the score was of that person.
Ali, just maybe to you, could you tell us a little bit more about the content of the program? Like, what did it look like at a really high level? What were the key components of it?
Yeah, well, there were Well, when we designed it, we identified that there were 4 key themes that came out of the data. So that was really looking at mental agility, which is the ability to be curious and embrace complex topics, a breadth of interests, and looking at novel approaches as well. So really that sort of mental stretch going on in your brain. It was also looking at change agility. So Simon's touched on that a couple of times. So change agility is all about being a catalyst for change, looking for change, tinkering for change, being impatient for change, taking the heat for change, and that future possibilities, and being really much more focused on different options. We were also interested in self-awareness. That had also scored low for many people, not just the person potentially that Simon just mentioned. But that's all about personal insight. How well do you understand yourself really? I mean, some people say, oh, I understand myself. Generally, they're probably lower on the spectrum. So this is looking at understanding and noticing what you're doing now. So it obviously correlates with emotional intelligence, and it is about understanding your strengths, weaknesses, and what's going on with you and how you can push yourself in different ways. And the final one is focus, which also links back to what Simon was saying, is we'd had people who were encouraged, developed, had been trained to be structured, organized in the detail. And yet now we were saying, we want you to be big picture thinkers. We want you to be visionaries. So focus is all about leadership, being able to provide that bigger picture thinking, that wider perspective. And so we needed to build in some things to develop that. So in terms of the structure of what we recommended, we said it wasn't just about the context of COVID and everybody working from home. We'd worked on the virtual world for some time then. And so we're really confident that we could provide and enable Simon and his team to have a program that could be delivered completely virtually, that would be exciting, interactive, and a really good learning environment, and that actually would chunk the learning into pieces so that people could apply stuff as they went through. So you would actually get a more sustained learning experience. So the 4 modules were set up, and we also built in, for each of those themes, we also then built in what we call action learning groups. And these are sort of group coaching experiences, but we did it with a wood twist. And we brought in senior leaders, because part of what we wanted to do was make sure that the program had leadership sponsorship, but also part of the development of these leaders was to get them visibility. So we needed senior leadership to see what they were doing and what they were about. So these action learning groups were facilitated with senior leaders from Wood, who then were able to develop their own coaching skills as part of that while they watched everybody and supported them in coaching, but also learned about the challenges and the experiments that the participants brought to the action learning group. So each participant would go through, say, a module on mental agility. They'd have an experiment that they were challenged to come up with to go and test and practice, and then bring that to the action learning group. And so that in itself was also a really powerful mechanism to embed the learning, but also gain visibility, and for the leaders to start to see some themes appearing across the groups. And finally, it was all supported with a learning management system, which had other materials and tools to support self-directed learning and that community, because it was also about creating, a community across the Wood group so that they could connect and network as well.
Lovely, thank you, Ali. Alison mentioned, Simon, that the program was completely virtual. How did that land in Wood? Was that new in the business? What was going on at the time?
Yeah, that was brand new for us, because we were up until that point we had been running leadership programs in many different countries. So we were getting people together in locations, flying around the world, delivering programs. So this was a real change for us. I mean, there's an obvious benefit in the cost of that all dropped off, and there was always a bit of cynicism around about how much you can get out of the virtual learning platform or environment. But I think while we haven't replaced being in person, You can't replicate any of the coffee conversations or catching people over dinner in the evening. I think we've achieved everything that we set. Well, we've achieved everything we set out to achieve with the program. Microsoft Teams, 2 years ago was quite different than it is now. It was much clunkier. There weren't the updates that have been kind of continually happening then. So there was a real stretch for us in terms of the team facilitating it. But we very quickly fell into the kind of that virtual etiquette, way of doing things. The way the way that the program's been designed, the questions every 6, 7, 8 minutes made sure that people didn't switch off, or if they did, would catch them out, quite quickly. So it really kind of, helped that level of engagement. We connected way more people than we would ever have done, from a far more diverse range of our different businesses. So it's created, networks that we never had before. It's created conversations and connections that we didn't envision. I mean, we thought this will be a great way to connect people, and it's exceeded our expectations in that. I also think it's been, in some ways, it seems strange to say this from a virtual perspective, but it's been more inclusive. So there are, we've had examples of introverts that have come to me to say, "Oh, I love it because I can put my hand up virtually." They might not have done that in 10, 15 years in a meeting room, but they would certainly be quite happy to just pop the button, wait for my turn, my space will come. So that's been really useful. And I had an individual with Asperger's who spoke to me and was talking about some concerns around about how they would come across, how they'd show up, some of their sort of behavioural traits, and it took me completely by surprise, having been working with them online for a number of sessions, to say, "Oh, well, I didn't pick up any of that. I wouldn't notice any of that. Keep doing what you're doing." And their feedback was, "Yeah, I can really manage how I show up, and enjoy that as well." So I would never have said this 2 years ago, but there has been a level of inclusivity that's come from the virtual world that we may not have got, and we certainly wouldn't have had to that extent had we been in person. So we haven't replaced everything, and it'll be nice to get back in the room with people at some stage. But we've managed to achieve everything through the virtual platform.
And that actually links to a lovely question that's appeared in the Q&A, which is, now that travel restrictions have been lifted, would you run these sessions face to face or virtually?
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I kind of joke with Alison that 2 years ago we didn't travel because the oil price was too low, and now we're not traveling because the oil price is too high. So there's no happy medium.
Can't win.
Can't win. But it's a great question. I think it certainly will be here to stay. We've disrupted a little bit of how leadership development has been delivered in the organisation. We've connected more people. And we didn't mention that we did this in sort of bite-sized workshops. So, we were doing kind of 2.5 hours spread over a period of time. That cadence has worked well also. So, I'm sure people want to get back together in a room, but we've been able to work this into people's days. So no one's taken a week off and flying on a weekend to be there for a Monday morning and home, late on a Friday night or back on a Saturday morning like we would have done before. So there will always be a place now for me for virtual learning, and that will be kind of blended with some of the in-person stuff as well. But it's been an eye-opener in terms of what we've been able to achieve.
Yeah, lovely. And I wonder if the pandemic hadn't happened, whether it would have been quite so easy to convince the business to do something like this virtually on such a large scale as well. It probably would be more challenging, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but we've reflected on this a couple of times. I'm not sure if we would have done anything radically different, or not sure how radically different we would have done things had we not had the pandemic. So it did force us to think a little bit differently. We had gone along that tried and tested route of, we'll assess our hypos, we'll create a cohort, then we'll figure out what to do with them. We'd done that before, but it was at that point, it was that kind of pivot to, right, well, we can't do what we did before, we have to do something different. And we thought, here's an opportunity to try and stretch our ambition and really try and mix it up a little bit. Some of that was forced upon us, but it's been a benefit, no doubt.
Love it. Another question that's popped up in the Q&A, which I really like, was, did Management Dynamics design the program for Wood, or was it designed together? And it prompts me to remember that my favourite piece of this particular project, which was the collaborative approach that we took. Ali, would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, with most of our clients, and I'm, you know, broadly, we would talk and we would get the requirements and we'll go away and we'll come up with something and share it back. That's not how it worked here. And so this is a lovely case study of a real partnership in action. And it was partnership right from the beginning, and the design of it was done together. And we would talk through session plans and outcomes and different ways of bringing things in, different models, frameworks, how we were going to do things. And so we definitely in Management Dynamics learned from Simon and his amazingly experienced team a lot. And I think we shared our learning too. So it was a very mutual experience. And it's ended up with both Jenni and myself and all our team at Management Dynamics being incredibly proud of that program. We like to build things that are fit for purpose and really bespoke and fitting the need. And that collaborative approach, one, you know, created us to learn a lot, but it meant that the actual solution was spot on. And so I'm so proud of it and the team at Wood of how you've taken it. So yeah, I'd like more of those.
The other thing I liked about it was that it felt like a very agile approach. So we were designing with the cohort 1, we were designing it with obviously the whole program in mind. We delivered it to cohort 1, and then Simon, you and your guys, you know, delivered it to a further 8 cohorts. Is that right? 9 cohorts in total, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
yeah. I think the co-creation, I think, you know, brought something extra. Also, you know, I've told you my, you know, the favorite story about experimentation. You know, that was a Management Dynamics. Experimentation as a leadership style, as a learning style, and you know, our instant reaction to that was we don't do experiments. That's not a word that we use in Wood. Like I said, we're structure and hierarchy, and you know, on time and on budget. But through that kind of conversation, we were able to say, well, maybe that's exactly why we should use experiments. You know, to get people out of that way of thinking, and to really kind of stretch the idea of, you know, safe to fail, learn from, you know, from experimenting, and that language is kind of seeped into a lot of what we do now, and hear it more and more. But you know, just a great example of had we set about this ourselves, but that's something we would never have considered or never brought in, and it's stretched a lot of people to think about an experiment. It's made a number of people nervous, even just the word. You know, in the approach. So that's been a really nice aspect. And I can remember clearly the meeting when you said experiment, we thought.
I know, I remember the reaction. It was like, whoa.
I know, that's not a word we use. That one, people won't understand that. And
I love that you're open to trying it out and experimenting with cohort 1 to see what they thought of it and getting that feedback. And it was really, really good feedback, wasn't it? Yeah, lovely.
And we really did adjust the program all the way through. And I mean, you've still been adjusting it. So, you know, based on the different cohorts. And I think, you know, that, you know, agile approach to it's not fixed. It's more about what is the need and how do we fix, you know, and support that group and stretch it and adapt it each time. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, lovely. Got a question coming to the Q&A about data, which is obviously the theme that's running through this webinar. So we looked at data at the beginning. So we designed the program with data in mind and the analytics and what that was telling us. Yeah, we then measured it throughout the program as well. We measured the impact we were having and the reaction of the participants to various aspects of the program. What about at the end, Simon? How did data you know, come into its own at the end? How did you use data to kind of measure the success of the program?
Well, we've been able to, you know, demonstrate a couple of things. One is, you know, so succession readiness was one of our outcomes, you know, that we wanted to kind of, you know, we wanted to improve upon, and we can certainly draw a clear line between the number of alumni, you know, people that have been through the program who have gone on at least 1, and in some cases 2 levels within the organization as a result of or since being on the program. So might that have happened anyway, perhaps, but a lot of that's come at the very least. We're preparing people far more to take those steps, and we're giving senior leaders more confidence in those individuals, that they're now starting to think about, okay, who am I as a leader? What is my leadership style? How can I best impact, you know, the organization? So the succession readiness gap has certainly come down on that group of people and more senior roles. And other things that are not quite as tangible will be, you mentioned it earlier on, Jenny, the exposure that we've now been able to create between, or the exposure to the senior leadership team that the population that have been through the programme. I'm convinced a number of those relationships have led to things like the succession decisions being made. They've led to great mentoring relationships when people have been connected. We had a situation where we had an individual Aberdeen individual in Australia. They found out they had a couple of things in common, or they were working on something similar. We connected them together. Between them, that came up with a better solution for a client, and led us to winning a piece of work in Australia based on a solution that had come from another part of the business. So there was a kind of a nice connection there. So it's hard to kind of drill it down into great levels of data, the outcomes, but we've got so many great experiences, stories, wins that have come out as a result of it. But yeah, I think if we were to boil it right down to the data question is, we can see the succession readiness has narrowed significantly in these individuals, and the confidence in our leadership has grown in the promotion of those people.
Lovely, and the visibility by the sounds of it as well that they have of those people in a virtual world, right, where it's quite hard otherwise to get visibility unless you're directly working with somebody. Yeah, lovely. There's another question this really links to, which was the primary driver behind the programme to engage the participants, or was it more of a succession planning exercise? Was that succession readiness piece in your minds as you were designing the programme?
Yeah, I suppose that was one of our ongoing challenges is strength and depth in our succession, and we have, like a lot of organisations, good people throughout the business. One thing we're not good at is connecting our talent or connecting our people. So we work in silos to an extent, and our people data is not good. So in terms of identifying people, getting to know people, who's who, what their capabilities. So the program was really about finding who our talent was, identifying what their needs were, with a view to a sustainable pipeline of people moving from that middle management, for want of a better term, through into the increasingly senior roles. But yeah, certainly succession readiness was one of our key drivers that we called out right at the beginning.
Yeah, lovely. And Ali, some of the themes that we're seeing in the wider learning and development context, or the wider leadership development context, are things like the Great Resignation, organisations. What's also been termed as the Great Reshuffle, so kind of organisations having to restructure themselves to suit changing landscapes. How did you see those showing up in this client need?
Well, I mean, when we started out designing the program, one of the things that we went through was what's the measures of success, and Simon's mentioned about building up the bench strength, getting people ready for those more senior roles. We also thought actually it should impact retention. We know that people like to be developed in organizations, so it should mean that we've got lower retention levels, lower leaving levels, compared to the wider population, and that it should enable us to think about people's overall engagement and satisfaction and all of those good things too. And so I think that's definitely one key part that we've seen, so that those people on the programme are much less likely to leave. I don't think you've had very many people leaving at all, have you, Simon? So in terms of the Great Resignation, that's not been happening. In terms of moves, though, people have been moving, but they've been moving within Wood. So in terms of giving people that, which has come out of COVID, people going, oh, I would like a different thing. That's actually been supported as part of this programme for people to have more clarity about their career, where they want to go, what's important to them, but also a channel to talk about it and to work with it, and for Wood to support them.
Lovely. One more question from the Q&A. Someone's put, given how the programme was designed around the participants, was it just run once, or was it changed for later cohorts? Simon, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, well, we so far had 9 different cohorts, and as we've gone through from 1 to 9, we continually look at that data to make sure that it's not changing. Because I think that when we first, how we designed it initially was based on about 69 participants. So that was the aggregated data. That's what informed the creation. But as we've assessed more people, as we've grown the number of cohorts, we've tweaked the content. So there were other agilities that started to become apparent for different groups as they went through. So yeah, we actually built, I think, at least one additional workshop from the original concept, and we've tweaked some of the content to focus more on some areas that are more meaningful as the cohorts go through it. And that's been important because we start each of the cohorts by talking them through why this is important to them, that it's been designed around their needs. So to be true to that, we've had to kind of continually look at the data for each cohort to make sure that it's in keeping. So the core content remains the same, and we tweak it per cohort.
And there was some tactical stuff that we did. I remember out of cohort 1, the feedback we got from them was that they wanted more time for discussion, for example. So we ended up,
that's right,
for later cohorts, extending each workshop by half an hour, we didn't add any more content in, did we? We just made them longer so that we could have more space for that discussion, because they wanted to get deeper into each of the topics, didn't they? Which was lovely. So
that was it. You know, going into that virtual world, people enjoyed the breakouts and wanted more time in the breakouts and wanted to kind of explore the topics a bit more than we originally had time for. But that extra half hour made a difference. But primarily, that was all given over to discussion.
Yeah, lovely. So where to from here? What's next for these leaders in your business? What's the future of the Leadership Excellence Programme, do you think, Simon?
Well, there's a few things. We're at cohort 9. We did the last workshop for cohort 9 this week, so we've still got their action learning group and then graduation to come. So that, you know, in the next 4 weeks, I think that will be us through the first 9 cohorts. We're then talking about, you know, what's the next intake? How big does that look? It's been a huge amount of work, you know, the concurrent 9 cohorts. So I don't think we'll run 9 cohorts or at least 5 at the same time again. That was a lesson for us in terms of facilitation. We were, I think, over ambitious with that. We made it work, but we'll probably do other cohorts, but it will kind of it'll be more 1 and 2 at a time as opposed to what we've just done recently. But the LEP, the Leadership Excellence Programme, as we call it, that will be a feature of our leadership development offering. So we're building around that, if you like. We've, since launching this programme, we've added a kind of supervisory first steps into leadership, stepping into leadership, we called it. Does exactly what it says on the tin. That's people making their first, you know, steps into leadership, and we'll bookend that with a kind of a higher tier or top tier program that we're, you know, discussing at the moment. So it's going to be a key central part of our leadership offering for a, you know, invited cohort to go through. We're also developing an alumni program. So, you know, like we said before, we're not good in L&D at saying goodbye. So it's, you know, where does this stop? Where does it end? And where is it over to the individuals? So we've tried to draw a line in the sand in terms of the heavily facilitated workshops and make it more kind of a quarterly program. So we're going to run for all participants drop-in sessions once a quarter on topics that they want to explore more. So we've done some focus groups. We've run through all the material, what was most, you know, engaging, what was most impactful, what do you want to explore a bit more, and we've built, you know, or we're in the process of building 4 modules around about that. So that will be lighter touch, but going into a bit more detail for those that want to participate. So it's a non-mandatory piece there. And then the other thing is the benefit that's come out of the program is we're starting to talk about leadership in a wider context as a community of practice, if you like. So the fact that our senior leaders have joined the action learning groups, they've got some exposure to people. They've realized the people that are coming through the business, they're realizing that they're facing the same challenges as each other as groups. So it started to talk about, you know, what is leadership at Wood? How do we define that? How do we develop that? How do we start the conversation about that? So a kind of a culture of leadership, you know, community practice is starting to evolve as a result of the connection that we've made between the senior leaders and the participants, but also because we've ignited a bit of thinking in the participants around about what kind of leader are you? That's the thing that people keep coming back to, is how thought-provoking that has been for them as a leader as they try and move to the next level.
I love the idea of a community of practice around leadership, because it really suggests that you're trying to create a culture of leadership and leadership development in particular within the organisation at all levels. I really like that. Lovely. We're coming to the end of our time for this webinar. Simon and Ali, thank you so much for being our panelists and being grilled by me and our audience on this approach. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Right, we'll see you all soon. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. We're going to end it there. Thank you very much. Take care.